For my final presentation, I will be discussing the band Alabama. They're a country band, but they kind of fall into the southern rock subgenre. Now, to choose one song that really illustrates the band and their musical style, I'm choosing a cover of their music, which was done by the group Humphrey, called Alabama Sampler. And what Humphrey does is they have a collection of a cappella singers, and these different men combine their voices to imitate the musical parts of the instruments as well as the songs. Now, with that being said, let's focus in with that as a backdrop to examine the group Alabama. Now, Alabama was started in 1969 in Fort Payne, Alabama. And this group has always consisted of three main members. And those are Randy Owen on lead vocals, Teddy Gentry on bass guitar, as well as backup vocals, Jeff Cook on lead guitar, and the fiddle and keyboard. The drum set player has changed out every 2 to 4 years pretty much since the band started, so they've been through a lot of those guys, but they're drum players. You can find them dime a dozen. But the three main members of this band always focused on having a harmony. I found an interesting story. When they were first starting out as a band, they lived in Fort Payne and they shared an apartment. A couple of the members ended up working together laying carpet. But what they would do is they had 3 small twin beds in that tiny apartment room, in the bedroom. And what they would do in the evenings is as they would fall asleep, they would sing just any song that came to mind, mainly country, folk, almost what we would consider bluegrass. But they would fall asleep singing. So the different parts would just drop out as they fell asleep. And then, as a wake-up call, one of them would have an alarm that would go off in the morning. That member would wake up and start counting off. 1, 2, 3. And the other 2 members that would still be asleep would join in perfect harmony. They trained to the point where they would hear subconsciously, when they were still asleep, the count off. And they knew what part to come in on. Or if they were a little bit late, they woke up and joined in real quick. So they would do things like this, which are very unconventional. But they literally created this vocal harmony that was inseparable. Where I watched an interview where they discussed this, and the 3 members, Randy, Teddy, and Jeff, said that their harmony really clicked when they were driving. It was a 1970s white station wagon, or it may have been the 60s. I think it was 1970s. But as they were driving, one of the members was driving, and he kept getting faster and faster. And the faster he drove, the better the harmony got. Well, he got that station wagon up to 110 miles an hour, and their harmony clicked. So that's just an interesting backstory as to how they get such a rich, deep harmony. Now, to discuss the cover song from Humphrey, their sampler, it opens with a number of Alabama's different songs. And when it opens, you have a very bright 5 or even a 6-part harmony that comes in. And with that, okay, yeah, it is a 5-part harmony, yes. So with that, you have that very bright opening, all a cappella, which goes back to the roots of Alabama. Even though they would use modern instruments, rock instruments, electric guitar, electric bass, they still relied on that harmony as their bass component. Now, after the opening, then Humphrey moves into kind of a hip-hop style beatbox. And this proceeds for a little bit. There is an a cappella cover of a snare drum doing a paradiddle at timestamp 008, which is remarkable. There are a lot of beginning percussionists that have trouble playing those paradiddles, and the vocalist covers that with his voice perfectly. It's interesting as the first song progresses that at timestamp 013 to 015, the bass pitch goes counter to the main vocal line, where you have, there we go, from left to right, where you have the lead vocals that go down in pitch. You have the bass line that does the opposite, and it comes up. So the bass changes the color pitch, but it still maintains an energy through that piece of music. And as a bass singer, I just love that. That goes back a little bit to, I guess you could say, elements of sort of a Baroque patterning with bass line, because Baroque is mainly what's influenced the development of the electric bass lines that we see in a lot of rock music. It goes back to Baroque, classical, and Beethoven, which is just interesting because James Brown, his song Roll Over Beethoven, there were a lot of ironies in that song. But in terms of the instrumentation that Alabama used, I mentioned they used electric guitar. They still had traditional verses, talking about cornbread. If you watch their music videos, they're focused on kind of a southern life, kind of an Appalachia life, with sawmills and square body Chevys circled up around a bonfire, small town churches, things that definitely set them apart from a lot of the other groups of the time who were using these rock style instruments. So it's a good crossover. In the cover done by Home Free, we see that they go ahead and use a syncopation at timestamp 030, and that is something that Alabama did. Home Free, while they tweaked a few things, they did not come up with that originally. They were imitating what the band originally did. And what that syncopation does is it creates this offbeat or strong offbeat feel, which is not all that common in many forms of modern music that I can think of. It almost goes back to kind of like a hoedown bluegrass style. But then going through timestamp 204, we feel an accelerando. Now, whether it's actually there or not may be debatable, but there's an energy as the music picks up and you can feel it, which helps tie into another moment of syncopation in timestamp 225. As this goes, we have more energy, things are moving more in the song, and that leads into the key change at timestamp 249, where that key change livens up the music, imitates the actual song Dixieland Delight, but it also goes ahead and sets up the cover to switch into their next song. And as Dixieland Delight finishes and proceeds into Angels Among Us, which that song is more of it's a ballad, kind of a 90s country feel with a cross of old gospel music in it. Kind of like an early Johnny Cash with gospel roots. And there's also like a big, kind of like a black church choir harmony that accompanies that. But on the transition from Dixieland Delight to Angels Among Us, we feel the key settle. Dixieland Delight is coming along, and the notes drop. And then there are a couple opening pitches to Angels Among Us. Oh, I believe. And we see right there that it picks up the key change and continues. Alabama was ahead of their time. They revolutionized what was considered to be country music. They incorporated innovations from Beethoven onward. It's just remarkable.